Is my penis normal? I can't tell you how many times people ask me this in clinic. I'm Dr. Reena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon, and today we're going to talk about average penile length. So, what determines penile length? Well, penile length is primarily determined by genetics, but there's also factors from the environment or hormonal factors that can play a role. You could check out my video on how to increase penile size, but there's not many things that are effective and safe that you can do easily. But at the end, I will share some really simple, easy things that can help your penis appear a little bit longer. And it's important before I get into the numbers, if you're going to measure your penis or get your penis measured, realize that it is variable even person to person. It can vary depending on the state of arousal, how cold you are, how anxious you are, and it can change over a lifetime due to loss of testosterone or loss of blood flow due to conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or other things that can affect blood flow to the penis. Alright, let's get right down to it. What is the average penile length? Well, when you ask that question, you have to specify, do you mean erect, do you mean flaccid, and how is it measured? So the largest study we have compiles data from 20 different studies looking at over 15,000 men. They measure it both flaccid and stretched or erect, and actually they've looked at studies and found that when you stretch your penis maximally, that's also similar to the size you're going to get when it's erect. They measured it from the tip of the gland. So, the very tip of the penis to the what we call the pubopenile junction. So, where the penis hits the bone, and that's after pushing in the fat a little bit. And so you measure it on the top side. When you look down, that's called the dorsum of the penis, and that's where you measure it. They measure it both flaccid and stretch, and in some circumstances erect. They can also measure the flaccid or erect circumference, so that means the size around the penis, and they either take that measurement at the base of the penis or at the mid-shaft of the penis. And specifically, they only include studies in this review that had measurements done by a physician or healthcare provider. Because you can imagine, if someone's measuring themselves, they're going to have a tendency to overinflate those numbers. They also didn't include patients who had problems with their penis like period disease or plaques or curvatures or anything like that. So what they found, the average flaccid length was about 3.6 inches or 9.1 centimeters. When they looked at both stretched and erect length, that was between 5.1 and 5.2 inches or 13.1 or 13.2 centimeters. Looking at the erect circumference or measurement around, they found it to be between 3.6 and 4.6 centimeters or 9.3 centimeters to 11.6 centimeters. And if you look at my very old video reacting to scrubs, I reviewed a study that looked at primarily Caucasian UK-based men, and the numbers were very, very similar. But if you look at what men think is average, most men think that 6 inches is the average length of the penis, and so most people think that they should be longer than the average person. If you take anything away from my channel, you should realize that penile length is not the be-all end-all for pleasure. I've made tons of videos talking about pleasure and female anatomy, and if you've watched those, you know that women derive the majority of their pleasure from the clitoris, which is the homologue or analogous to the penis of the man, and so they get a lot of pleasure from the clitoris, which actually anatomically looks very similar to the penis, but it's all on the inside of the vulva. While having a large penis is touted to be so important, it's actually not the most valuable thing when it comes to pleasure, and it's definitely not what you should value your worth to be. However, if you're thinking about ways to increase penile length, of course, watch my video where I go over all the options, but a simple way would be to remove the hair that's on the mons, and that will make your penis look a little bit longer. Also, if you can lose weight, that will help alleviate some of that fat that's sitting on top of the mons, which is the area right above the penis, and your penis will then appear longer. And bottom line, focus on pleasure and not penis size. But if you want to know the numbers, now you have them. And as always, remember to take care of yourself, because you're worth it.